Welcome back, everybody, to the X Factor podcast. And today we are back. Long awaited return. It's been a couple of months, but we are here. Get into week 14 of the NFL season. We're now in the point of the season where we know what contenders are, what we're at a contendership, and what teams are about to go into full mock draft mode. But then we have the teams where it's like we don't know where they're gonna be at. They have a shot to make the playoffs, but gonna potentially miss them. But we're gonna get into a couple of things here before I start talking about this week's games. I have a big fan right now of watching the Detroit Lions. I feel like a lot of people have. I feel like a lot of people have enjoyed watching the Lions this year, and it's crazy because the Lions have always been a really mediocre team. But these last two, since Dan Campbell's came in, he's brought in a good culture to the team, and they've done what he said they're gonna do, and I like what they're doing. I don't think any team can beat them right now. They play Green Bay Thursday Night Football. I will get into that here in a little bit, but I want to talk about more of a Jared Goff, because this man, he has played phenomenal this year. Up to that point, up to where he had that 3 interception game, or that 5 interception game against Houston. Since then, he's played pretty well. 400 yards against Jacksonville, 4 touchdowns. Indianapolis, he didn't get a touchdown, but he threw for 269, and then he threw for 221 and 2 touchdowns against Chicago. Jared Goff, in my opinion, he needs to be talked about as one of the MVP frontrunners. This is best year. I could be confidently say this is his best year. Although you could say one of those Ram years, but this Jared Goff is just different. Like, we've watched Jared Goff in the past, and we've seen him grow as a quarterback, grow into the systems of the offenses he's been in. Ben Johnson has been phenomenal help when it comes to helping this offense grow and be more electric. And I think it's a weird thing to say. Watching the Detroit Lions is fun to watch because you never know what shenanigans they're gonna pull out of the pocket and all that. Jared Goff, he's 8th in the league in passing yards. He's 22 touchdowns, which is 5th in the league. He has 9 interceptions. Mind you, 5 of them were that one game, so you take those 5 away, he only has 4. And, the 5 interception game that he had against Houston, people say take him automatically out of the MVP race. I don't think it should, because he literally came back the next week, he scored 6 touchdowns, passing touchdowns, since then. And he's thrown for maybe 800 yards in those past 3. And combined all that together, about 800 yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 wins in those, and 2 of them are blowout wins. Well, not really blowout for Indianapolis, but 24-10 or whatever. So, another guy I'm thinking as MVP, I think I would have to go probably Lamar, maybe. And I know that's crazy to say, but I would put Joe Burrow up there. People always go after the best team, or like the best team, the best player on the best team. But you have to look at Burrow for a minute, because this year in particular, it's not been entirely his fault. Hell, just look at the games that they've had just this season. their defense is one of the worst defenses I've seen. Um, Hell, they lost to the Patriots week 1, and then they lost to Kansas City in week 2. And in week 2, they looked really good. And then defense, Commanders get them on week 3, and then they've only been able to hold certain, the Giants and the Browns. They've been held to not many points, but anybody can do that. Hell, the Panthers scored 24 on them, and that was 4 weeks into the year when the Panthers were in a really going downhill at that point. They've picked themselves somewhat up in these last couple of games. This defense has been historically awful, and the way Joe Burrow has been able to hold them in this game, or in any game, in that matter, and try to help them win. He's currently first in passing yards. He has 3,337. He has 30 passing touchdowns into his 5 interceptions. That's a really good year, but if you look at the records, like, how are they 4-8? And their quarterback is this kind of stat line. Well, it's defense. The defense has not been good enough. The defense has been really bad. This is about as bad as what Dallas had to deal with early in 2020. Although this one, I don't think this one's as worse as the 2020 Cowboys defense, but it's still pretty bad. Another guy I think for MVP, Saquon Barkley, or Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry, but I think those are guys you're more going to look like in for the Offensive Player of the Year run. But because if we're being honest, this is a quarterback. The MVP I think has been more filled with a quarterback record. Now, Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry both have a chance to break the all-time rushing record. Now, if they can do that, I would push them into that conversation. And if we're being honest, the way, like Kellen Moore, he took a lot of heat for when he was in Dallas and the way his offensive style was, and especially at the end of his run. Not saying that I still don't believe that to right now, because offensively they're a rushing team, like they're a running football team. They can pass, but that's not the problem with Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore has always had a great system to run around. It's just the play calling at some point, it's people, they get used to it and they get to know it, and then boom, they get them. This year has been weird because they've been able to run the ball, like, really well. And if they can't run it, they're going to pass it. If they can't pass it, they're definitely going to run it, and they know that they can run down your throats. Hell, I don't even think Saquon Barkley, hasn't been held up. He's been held up twice under 100 yards just this season. That's incredible. Hell, he had that really good game against the Rams, 302 yards combined, receiving and with rushing, and he had 2 touchdowns in the process. Saquon Barkley, after the Rams game, has really put himself in that MVP spot. I do see Derrick Henry getting his way in there. The Ravens have been a really good team this year. They just one of their biggest things is Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker, he's hitting his washed era, I guess. It's weird because he's always been super good, and then this year alone, I wouldn't be surprised if they cut him. I wouldn't be surprised. He needs to get something going, otherwise he could potentially be out, because the missed field goals he had last week against the Eagles could have potentially helped them win. So, all I gotta say is they better find a way right now. Justin Tucker better find a way to make these kicks, otherwise he could be gone. Now we get out of the MVP conversation, talking about head coaches and these new hires and what could potentially be happening through these coaching carousels, or we call them now. Um, the openings already have been through Chicago, the Saints, and the Jets. So for those are the openings, the Jets. First, talk about the Jets. They were 2-3 when they fired Robert Saleh, and they just haven't been able to get back on a good track. Like, it's been worse since they fired him, which proves that Robert Saleh wasn't really a problem, and he wasn't. He was a good defensive coach, and he was a good coach, and hopefully we get to see him in. Well, he's obviously with Green Bay right now as like an assistant, I believe. But hopefully we get to see him as in another big stage where he could try to turn a team around. Because he wasn't the greatest, but he was able to work with what he had. And he had Zach Wilson for a couple of years, and he was the quarterback who's been roughed around. And, thinking with Rodgers, it could be different. The team on paper looks very solid. It's just they haven't been able to execute on the field, and I think a lot of it has to do with the offense. The offense, people know what they're doing. It's a West Coast offense. I feel like a lot of people or a lot of coaches and teams have kind of figured out how to stop some of those offenses. They need to bring someone in that has a unique style of offense. And especially, even if it's an offensive coach, you bring someone that has a good style and the way to shift things around and make it look exciting. And also exciting, but also make it look like where you can get a good shot for a playoff spot, because your offense, you need to trust your offense. And we've seen with the Bengals, you need defense as well, but Jets' defense has always been solid the last couple of seasons at times. But I really don't know, honestly. The Jets just look like one of those teams that, like, they should be in playoff contention right now, but they're not. And hopefully, one of the guys they should be looking at is Ben Johnson as head coach. I think if you're a team looking for a new head coach, the three hires I'm looking at is Ben Johnson, Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick. Those are the three coaches I'm looking at right on the spot. Mike Vrabel, he did well for the Titans. I believe the last 2 years of him being with the Titans, the team just like fell apart right in front of our eyes. It was very sad because those late 2010s Titans teams and then 2020, 2021 Titan teams, those were pretty good teams. Like, those were teams that I think like a lot of people should talk about more. And it's just at the end of the run, it's just like Tannehill's getting old, and you're really left with Derrick Henry, and it just went down from there. And I think Vrabel could help a lot of teams get back to where they want to be in the position where they want to win and win a championship. Belichick, I think Belichick, even though he is way older than the other guys, and has not had great success with Brady or without Brady, he knows the fundamentals and knows how to get a team ready to go. And if you give him the right pieces, you give him the right system of players, boom, he could make anything work, especially on the defensive side. And then, of course, Ben Johnson should be the first person you look at. That man, he's going to change the way people look at football, I think. He's going to change the way people look at an offense. And I feel like with him, he's going to make football better for a lot of reasons. I feel like he's going to make it so difficult for people to actually cover his own offense that they're going to try to make some new designs in defense, and potentially, that could be some game-changing stuff right there. I just think Ben Johnson has that potential to be one of the greatest head coaches to ever exist. That's how high I speak of Ben Johnson. Hell, I'm starting to think that with Dan Campbell right now. He has a potential to be one of the greatest coaches. Um, but we're not at that time right now. I do think Dan Campbell's one of the best coaches in the NFL right now. Um, and Ben Johnson's one of the best is the best offensive coordinator in the NFL right now. Um, so I'd like to see him get somewhere. Teams that could potentially be looking at a new head coach. I don't see. Oh, and then of course, I didn't even. The Jets, New Orleans Saints. The Saints, I think we all kind of figured. I said this before the season. Dennis Allen was going to get fired at some point. Now the first part of the year they looked great, but they kind of just slowed down after week 2. After they played Dallas. One of the biggest things on that team is quarterback, and I'm not saying Derek Carr isn't the guy for them, but I feel like they need to get somebody in there that can run the offense and be able to trust it more. Because with Carr, you're either getting a really good game or an alright game, but you're gonna lose, or a shitty game. And I think with this Saints team, that'd be another great place for Ben Johnson, in my opinion. They have some good pieces on offense. They could work with that. And I think Ben Johnson could get Derek Carr over that if they decide to keep him. The Saints are a little bit of a tricky one because I don't know where they would be thinking about at head coach for a lot of guys. And then we get to Chicago. Chicago's a piece of work. I think this is the most popular team right now that's trying to look for a new head coach. Like, I know it's only the 3 teams that are looking for jobs, but like the Bears could be the biggest job. Like, the Bears' job could be potentially game changing for a head coach because of what the team looks like right now. And Matt Eberflus, he was never going to be the guy there. Let's be honest here. That man, it was a questionable hiring when they hired him. And now they get to bring someone in that can help Caleb Williams and help this team get to where they can and finally get a quarterback that can pass for 4,000 yards, and that's going to be Caleb Williams, of course. This is another one of those situations where they need to look for a guy that's an offensive coach. Offensive coach with a lot of leadership and a lot of motivation, like a lot what Dan Campbell does for Detroit. Now, I can see a Ben Johnson hire, but him going to Chicago, I don't really know, because with the Lions and everything, who knows? Maybe he's not trying to do a division rival stuff. But, and again, it's a job opening. Who knows? He could take it. I really don't think this would happen, but it would be crazy with how everyone's been talking about John Gruden lately. John Gruden just got hired from Barstool, leaving to go coach Chicago Bears. That wouldn't be a terrible idea. It's all John Gruden knows what he's doing. But I don't know how well that would go with a lot of people, especially the way how he left the Raiders. They need to find a guy that can get Caleb Williams over that hump, because Caleb Williams, he has like high potential. They picked him first overall. He better like get something with him, and I feel like the organization has failed the fans a lot of time. It hasn't just been a quarterback issue and a team issue. It's been an organization issue. Bad organizations make bad mistakes. Cleveland, Deshaun Watson, for example. Bad organizations, bad decisions. The Bears haven't been a great organization, like, in forever. Now, They have the chance to. They have to find a coach that can get in here and know what they're going to do with Caleb Williams and with the pieces like Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, like them kind of guys, and get these guys over the hump. Right now, you know, Chicago is in that spot where they don't really need a. They shouldn't be trying to fight for a playoff spot at this point. If they can try to somehow get around, they're 4-8, get 9-8, maybe get a playoff spot. I don't know. They play the 49ers this Sunday, so this could be the end of their. They could be eliminated out of the playoffs by Sunday. Who knows? Coaches I've been thinking about though that could be getting fired, that are in the hot seat. A couple of them come to mind. Antonio Pierce for the Raiders. I didn't think he should be the head coach anyway. I thought it was a risky hire when they hired him. Made it official last offseason. Doug Peterson for the Jaguars. I'm surprised he hasn't been fired yet. I do believe that he could be getting fired, and that would be a great place for Ben Johnson with Trevor Lawrence. And then, you look at the Giants, Brian Daboll, but I don't think they should fire him. I think it'd be a bad mistake for them to fire Brian Daboll. Because if we're looking at what he's done, he led this Giants team in 2021 to the playoffs when nobody thought that they were going to make the playoffs. And they won a playoff game. And they did it with Daniel Jones of all quarterbacks. And now, of course, that's how Daniel Jones and then that was the worst thing to happen to him too. I said this a while back. The Giants making the playoffs was the worst thing to happen to him, and it's bad that going to the playoffs hurt an organization more than it did them having another losing season. Because if they would have had another shitty losing season, Daniel Jones would have never got that contract. They would have had a different quarterback by now. But they made the playoffs, and look where they're at now. They don't got Daniel Jones, they don't got Saquon Barkley, and they're sitting at 2-10, potentially getting the first pick in the draft, so they can get Shedeur, Travis Hunter, whoever. But when they look into their draft process, the first thing, I don't even want them to even think about getting Travis Hunter or anyone. They need to get a quarterback. They need to fix that issue first. Get their next Eli Manning or Phil Simms. Get the guy that's going to help them the next 15 to 20 years. And I think Shedeur potentially could be that guy. Quentin Ewers could potentially be that guy. But they don't need to. They need to think about quarterback only when they look into this draft in this first round, and then build off of that. Because if you get Shedeur in there, boom, you got him and Malik Neighbors all in one. That's gonna be pretty good. I don't really think of any other teams that could fire their head coach. Kevin Stefanski for the Browns, but I don't think they should fire him. The Deshaun Watson deal has been what's fucked up this team for Cleveland, and it's sad that that's where we're at with it, but it's true facts. People said Kyle Shanahan, but I don't think Kyle Shanahan would get fired. I don't think John Lynch would fire him at all. Hell, they can not win a game next year or for the rest of the year, and they wouldn't fire him. 49ers have been interesting though, because they've been one of those. They've been that team that's they had really good year, go to the Super Bowl, and then the next year they just kind of die out for a season, and then they kind of come back. It's always the injury bug that get them, and that's what got them this year. Right after they went to the Super Bowl too. It's ironic on how that happens. And then you look at the Cowboys, Mike McCarthy. People have been talking about that, and I might be in the minority of people, but I wouldn't mind Cowboys keeping Mike McCarthy. Now, as much as I would want, as a fan, I would want them to hire Ben Johnson because that. I will talk about him all day or for the rest of this show. I will talk about him for the rest of the show if I have to, because that's how much I like Ben Johnson and the way he runs an offense, and I think he could run a team well as a head coach. The Cowboys, though, Mike McCarthy. A lot, and this year in particular wasn't Mike McCarthy's fault. A lot of it has to go on the front office. They didn't do anything in free agency except for Eric Kendrick, which was a good signing, but outside of that, they didn't do anything. They didn't fix the running back issue. They need to fix the D-line issue. They haven't fixed that. They didn't fix the receiving issue because they can think they can trust Jordan Brooks and Turpin and all that, but you can trust them on certain plays, but when you have the least separation with wide receivers in the league, like, it makes you think a little bit. And that was a point at the season where that was a stat where the receivers, Cowboy receivers, were like last in like getting separation. And then of course Dak getting hurt and did nothing for this team. So it's just been hit after hit and after hit. And then when nobody thought the Cowboys were going to win another game this year, they end up beating the Commanders with Cooper Rush. And then they end up beating New York, which I think a lot of people already saw anyway. And then now if they can beat Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's defense isn't great, Dallas is could potentially be 6-7 heading into next week. And then they play the 3-9 Panthers. So if they can come out of these two games, boom, they're 7-7. They're fighting for that playoff spot. And then of course they got Tampa Bay and Philadelphia, which I don't think they would beat Tampa Bay, and I don't think they would beat Philadelphia. And part of me doesn't think they can beat Cincinnati either. But then they also have to play the Commanders. And I don't think, this comes back with McCarthy, I don't think they should fire McCarthy. We know last year, we saw it, Mike McCarthy, the first part of the year, the offense wasn't ran well. But they were able to get it 6 weeks into the year. But this year, they got to the point where they could get the offense going, but they got it to a point when Dak was out and half the team's there, and Zach Martin ain't playing well. This is his worst year by far. And now we're sitting at a point where it's like people want to get him fired and want him out of here. I'd give him another shot. And people can laugh at that all they want, but Dak Prescott's best years as a quarterback has been when Mike McCarthy has been head coach. You can't tell me that's not a good thing. That's a really good thing. And when you have a quarterback for the next 4 years on that contract, you better be looking at your head coach, because if you throw a different head coach in there, it could either, one, ruin the vibe at the locker room, or two, it could be the greatest thing that ever happened to him. And I think Mike McCarthy, and in the relationship that he has with Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and a lot of these guys on this team, I don't know how that would work with the team well. And yes, Mike McCarthy has had questionable things happen, like his play calling has been questionable at times. His clock management has been crappy at times in his career. But at the same time, he's the first Cowboys head coach since Jimmy Johnson to have multiple winning seasons. Like they've had 12-win seasons. Or since the 90s. To go, even though they don't have a championship to play for, making the playoffs, winning 12 games a year is still better than having 3 and 14 season, or a 4 win season, or a 5 win season. Like, if you're mad because they always lose in the playoffs, well, then stick to only having 2 wins, 3 wins a year, because that ain't fun either. And I've been on both sides of that. 2015, Romo getting hurt. 2020, now this year, like, haven't been great. I'd rather be in the playoffs and then lose and get disappointed in the playoffs, because that's what happens. You get disappointed in the playoffs. That's how football works for a lot of people. Now, if you can't see that Mike McCarthy heading the playoffs every year like he has been isn't a good thing, I don't know what to tell you. Getting into this week of games, though, Thursday night, Detroit plays Green Bay. The last 5 games, Detroit is 5-0. Green Bay is 4-1 in their last 5. Now, I think Detroit will come out on top on this one. Also, remember to follow, before I get any further, remember to follow the TikTok, X Factor Sports. I will have my score predictions on there, but my predictions of who I think is going to win, or my preview of this week, will be on the channel. So back to where I was talking about, Detroit. I don't think nobody can beat him right now. Like, NFC North games are going to be close because it's NFC North, but I don't think Green Bay can hold up with Detroit. I think Detroit will take the win there. Heading into Sunday's games, the New York Jets face the Miami Dolphins. Miami trying to get back into that playoff hunt. Getting Tua back has been the best thing to happen to them. They're 3-2 in the last 5. I think Miami will end up with the win here. The Jets right now, they're just a lost cause, I think, at this point of the season. Just trying to get to this end of the season, and the way they fell apart during the Seahawks game, it was a disaster from the start. And if you think about it, a lot of the games that the Jets have played this year, they should have won. Like, they had a chance to beat Denver. They were 1 play away from beating Denver. Bills, there were a couple plays that could have changed the game. The same thing with the Steelers. And then the Patriots. And then the Colts. And now Seattle. Those are just wins. Those are just a couple plays where that could have changed them, and they could be potentially fighting for a playoff spot. Now the Jets, I'm not really worried about them trying to fight for the playoffs. Now they're pretty much out at this point. But we look at Miami now. They play the Jets. I could see them winning. The rest of their schedule, they play the 8-5 Houston Texans. Texans have been struggling lately. Dolphins could potentially get into there and win. They play the 49ers. The way the 49ers are right now, I think Dolphins will win. And then they play Cleveland. Cleveland has a good defense. Jameis Winston's balling out of nowhere. That's going to be a tough game, but I think Miami could potentially win the rest of these games. And then they play the Jets again in the last game of the year. They win the rest of these games. What would that be, 10-7? Yeah. So, Dolphins, I wouldn't be surprised Dolphins win out and make the playoffs. And hopefully they get into the warm weather, because them, we all know their stat line in the cold weather. Get a home playoff game, try to get a good win there, try to make sure to stay out of the cold. The Vikings, Falcons, the return of Kirk Cousins to the Minnesota Vikings Stadium this Sunday. The Falcons are 2-3 in their last 5 games. Um, they've struggled lately. They got demolished by Denver a couple weeks ago. Um, and they lost to the Chargers last week when Kirk Cousins threw almost, what was it, 3 or 4 interceptions? Yeah. Since they've lost to Dallas, they've lost to the Saints, Broncos, and they've been 0-3 since they lost to the Cowboys. And it's kind of ironic on how when teams play the Cowboys afterward, like after a couple weeks after, they just fall apart. I really don't understand it. Um, Falcons need to find something here because they're 6-6. They're trying to fight for a playoff spot. They play Minnesota, and I don't. Minnesota is weird because two years ago they were at this point 10 wins around that area. Um, and I didn't think they were a good 10-win team. I don't know about this 10-win team like Vikings. Now, I don't think they could run for a Super Bowl. They could potentially get divisional round, I think, but I don't think they're a Super Bowl caliber team. And I think a lot of it has to do with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's played great this year, by the way. But my main thing is, what can he do when the lights are bright on him, And what can he do when the playoffs come around? And can he hold up to his side? Um, and plus, if they have to play Detroit's already beat him this year, and then they almost, and one of the teams that I will get into the Cardinals later because Cardinals have been on fire. Um, these last couple of games for the Minnesota Vikings have been kind of scary looking. Like, if you look at just their season in general, they destroyed the Giants. They won by one score against the 49ers. They demolished the Houston Texans. Another one-score game to the Packers. One-score game to the Jets. One-score game to the Lions where they lost. They lost to the Rams. And then in November alone, one-score game to the Colts. One-score game to the Jaguars. One-score game or 10-point win against the Titans. And then a one-score game to the Bears. And then literally a one-score game to the Cardinals. They've been in these one-score games. And then you look at the rest of their season. They have the Falcons, they have the Bears, they have the Seahawks, and that's the Packers. And that's just the rest of January. And these are all games where the Minnesota Vikings could lose. They could lose all these games, and I could see them losing all these games out of nowhere. I think they would. I think they go 2-2 in this stretch. I think they beat the Falcons, or I think they beat the Bears. Maybe 3-1 because I don't know. I could see the Cardinals, or I could see the Falcons beating the Vikings. I don't see Seattle or Green Bay losing. I don't see the Green Bay Packers losing to Minnesota though. And I don't see Minnesota losing to Chicago or Seattle, I don't think. But I could see them losing to the Falcons. And then, of course, the last game of the year, which could potentially be the NFC North title matchup right there with Detroit. And I don't think I don't think they'll beat Detroit. I think in this game, I think Minnesota will walk away with a couple points, maybe by a field goal victory, I think. And then after, the Falcons, they have to fight for the playoffs as well, and they have a pretty decent looking schedule after the Vikings. They got the 2-10 Raiders, they got the 2-10 Giants, they got the Commanders, and then they got the Panthers. So I could see them losing outside of, if they beat Minnesota, I could see them losing one game. That's the Commanders. And that's still a 10-7 record. Now, if they lose both the Commanders and Vikings, 9-8, not that bad. They could still, I think they could still win the division off that, depending on what the Buccaneers do. But going into the next game, the Saints and the Giants. I think the Saints will walk away with the win. Their Giants have just been awful this season, and I don't see them getting any better. The Eagles, Panthers. I think Panthers will bring up a good fight, but I think the Eagles will destroy them once they get the. And it's been this the last couple of games. It's Saquon's gotten better once the game progresses, and I think that's what's going to happen in this game, and I think that's what's going to be the game winner for them. The Browns play the Steelers again. They had a fantastic Thursday night football game. I think Steelers will come away with the win on this one, though. And it's weird because even though the Browns are 3-9, when Jameis is playing, they don't play like a 3-9 team. They play like they're about to fight for the playoffs. And they're gonna bring the Steelers a fight, and I think Steelers this year are one of the sleeper Super Bowl teams. I think, and that's crazy to say because of how the offense is, but they could. There's been times this year where they've beaten teams just off field goals. I think it's happened twice this year, just with them. You trust that defense, and you let Russell Wilson do his thing. And this is the Russell Wilson we've seen this year makes you wonder what the hell happened with him in Denver. Well, Nathaniel Hackett happened, and then Sean Payton, of course, and all that shenanigans happened, of course. But Russell Wilson, he's played phenomenal. And looking to see him get into playoff form as they play Cleveland, and I think they will win. The Buccaneers and Raiders, I think the Raiders will put up a fight, with Brock Bowers being the only star on the team anymore. Buccaneers, though, they're going to win. Buccaneers are a weird team because I feel like they shouldn't be 6-6, but they are. I feel like that with the Cardinals. Cardinals shouldn't be 6-6, but they are. They're one of the two teams that you don't want to play because there's a chance where you could potentially lose. Jaguars, Titans, no one's excited for this game unless you're a Jaguars Titans fan. Well, Trevor Lawrence is out for the rest of the year. And I think CJ Beathard's their backup. I don't even remember. But I think Titans end up with the win here. Seattle Seahawks versus the Arizona Cardinals. They played each other 2 weeks ago, I believe. They played each other. Yeah, a couple weeks ago. Seattle won 16-6. I think the Cardinals will come back, and I think they will beat the Seattle Seahawks. And it'll be a close game, and they'll fight their way back in to fight for the playoffs. The Rams and the Bills. On paper, 6-6 versus a 10-2 Bills team, and you'd be like, oh, Bills are probably gonna demolish them. I think the Rams could have a shot to beat them. Now, whether that happens, I don't think that will happen. But I think the Rams will put up one hell of a fight. They have all season. The Bears and 49ers, interesting game. I could see the Bears winning. But the mistakes the Bears have made this season alone, and now with Eberflus not being there, I don't even know how or what's going to happen with their new interim head coach. I can't think of his name right at the moment, but I do know, a lot of the Bears' mistakes have happened after that Hail Mary against the Commanders. And it's just been another mistake after another mistake after another. And then whatever happened in Detroit, that was the worst thing I've ever saw in my life. That was the worst thing I've ever saw. I do think, though, the Bears will put up a fight. But I think mistakes will be the reason why they lose again. And I think the 49ers will come out on top. And then you got the Chargers and you have the Chiefs. The Chargers have been a really fun team to watch because they're not a flashy team. They have what they have. They don't have a fantastic receiving core. They have a really underrated looking receiving core. Ladd McConkey literally is, in my opinion, the best receiver on the team. Um, then they be able to run the ball and play defense, and they've been able to do what their they've been able to work with their strengths of the team, and they're not showing their weaknesses. And the weaknesses that they have shown, that's been one of the reasons why they've lost. And I think they're gonna put up a fight against the Chiefs. I think every team that the Chiefs are gonna play throughout the rest of the year, it's gonna be a tough fight because let's be honest, the defense is what's holding this Chiefs team up. Um, but I think Chiefs will win. But I think Chargers will have a fight. And then we look at Monday night, Bengals Cowboys. Bengals really good offense, bad defense. Cowboys mediocre offense. Defense is slowly getting there and getting the system in with Mike Zimmer. Um, I think this is going to be a back and forth game, but I do think Cincinnati will win. I think they'll win by 10. So that is all for y'all right now. My college football predictions, playoff predictions, the top 25 thoughts, that will be out Friday, Thursday night or Friday. I'm recording this on a Wednesday night, so this will be out Thursday morning, afternoonish. Y'all stay blessed. Have a good one. Um, Remember to watch a lot of football because that's what we're here for. So, have a good one. Stay blessed.